morning and welcome to Connect MKE. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. This morning, our focus is on the arts. As we know, art influences society by changing opinions, instilling values, and translating experiences across space and time. Art leads people to create for the sake of expression and meaning. My guests today are creatives in the live theater, movies, and clothing design, and they all live right here in Milwaukee. My first guest is Michael Unger. He serves as the artistic director for the Skylight Music Theater. How are you, Michael?
Fine, thank you, Andrea. Thanks for having us on the show, and what a wonderful introduction. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time today. And the Skylight Music Theater has been around for over 60 years, bringing a full spectrum of musical theater works to a wide and diverse audience. If you would, tell us about the history of that beautiful theater and why it's so important for everyone watching to support the arts.
Sure. Well, it is a beautiful theater, one of the most beautiful in Milwaukee, and I started there in September of 2019. So the theater's been around long before I got there. We're now in our 62nd season and planning our 63rd, and we focus on music theater, so it's a full spectrum of music theaters, musicals, operas, operetta, oratorio. So it's really an interesting sort of niche. No straight plays without music necessarily, but certainly all sorts of music entertainment. And it is in a spectacularly beautiful venue, the Cabot Theater, which is modeled after a French opera house. And it's in the historic Third Ward in a wonderful location. And we focus on using lots of local talent. And it's just a very unique place to see theater, and it's a very intimate space. So when you walk into that space, when I first walked in, when I was interviewing for the job, my jaw literally dropped because it is that beautiful of a venue. And you don't feel that relationship in every venue where the audience feels like they're almost on stage with the actors. So the intimacy and the emotional exchange that happens is very special.
Yeah, that's so very true. You know the saying, there's not a bad seat in the house. That definitely qualifies. So needless to say, the last 2 years have been pretty challenging for the world of theater. So if you would kind of fill us in on the journey that you've had to take under the circumstances, and the word of the year and the last 2 years has been pivot. So how have you had to pivot, especially with the theater being hit so hard?
Yeah, well, I was on a Zoom call with some of the arts organizations, and someone referred to it, instead of pivoting, as pirouetting, which I kind of like. So we have pirouetted many, many times. So the past years, of course, has been difficult for everybody on so many levels, but we have stayed active, very active. We've had several virtual productions that we've done between concerts and musicals and all sorts of virtual dance classes, virtual children's activities. So we have actually stayed quite active in that virtual sphere, which we're all getting used to and maybe tired of, but hopefully we're beyond that. We've been back in business. We just closed our 3rd show, which was very successful in person. And we're about to open our 4th, Raisin, which is coming up, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it's been difficult. But what's so exciting is, first of all, to see the artists who are so excited to be back on stage and back in person, and to see the audiences equally excited to come in and just experience that, because you don't get that anywhere else. Live theater is live theater because it's live.
That's so very true. And I talked about the importance of really supporting the theater, but with the live theater being hit pretty much like the hardest of all the businesses that were out there, it's more important now than ever to support the arts. Would you agree?
Well, of course I would agree, because I'm in the arts, but yes, I mean, even in the good times, the arts needs a lot of support, and there is a lot of wonderful support in Milwaukee. When I first got to Milwaukee, I was amazed at how rich the cultural fabric is there, and how many arts organizations there are, and the support from UPAF, and going to see, I see as many shows as I can, and there's a lot of full houses at the ballet and the Rep and Marcus Center. I mean, there's so much going on that people really are coming out to see. But we do need support, and in harder times, which these are certainly harder times, more than ever. And next year, coming out of the challenges of this, it may be even harder next year than this year in terms of budgeting and support. So go to see shows, support where you can, support support UPAF. Go to the websites of your favorite theater and arts companies and just donate if you can, but mostly go see stuff.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, you had to change a couple of dates around due to the pandemic, and you mentioned A Raisin in the Sun, which of course is the 1974 Best Musical Tony Award-winning play by the legendary Lorraine Hansberry. So at the Skylight Music Theater, you're going to be having that production April 8th through the 24th. Talk
Yes.
about why you're so excited to bring this to the stage.
I'm happy to do that. So actually, the musical is called Raisin, and it's based on A Raisin in the Sun, obviously, and it is hews very closely to Lorraine Hansberry's wonderful, wonderful script. And the show was nominated for 9 Tony Awards and won 2. I saw this show on Broadway when I was a kid, obviously in New York, and it just never left me. The power of the performances. Even as a young boy, I was so impressed with the messaging, and it's a really important story to tell now, as important now as it was when it was written and when the musical was done.
Mm-hmm.
And it obviously concerns a Black family who are the first to buy a house in the all-white neighborhood of Clybourne Park, a fictional neighborhood, but it's based on where Lorraine Hansberry's family actually lived. And our world, our country, our world is so divided right now, and it's because of the fear of the other. And the bigotry literally lands on their doorstep with a white man representing Clybourne Park saying, "Hey, you don't want to move there. Why don't we buy you out of your house?" And one of the things that I love so much about Raisin is the matriarchs are really super strong. The women in that family sort of run the show, and they should. They succeed in changing their world by not backing down. And it's a really important message, because we cannot be as afraid of the other as we are, because the only way to survive in a society with lots of different kinds of people, which we should have, that's what society should be, is to accept each other and celebrate each other's differences. And this play is a beautiful illustration of what happens when that breaks down, and how hope and drive and integrity can blow past all that stuff.
Yes, I agree with you 100% on that. And even though that was set, 1950s in Chicago, the message is still very powerful today, because not only is it a reminder that art can really translate those important messages of equality and, like you said, determination and fortitude, but also really showing us that we've come a long way, yet we still have a long way to go. You have another production that you're looking forward to coming up in May, the
Yes.
Hunchback of Notre Dame. Tell us about that.
So that is a version of the Hugo novel written by Dennis DeYoung, who is the lead singer and songwriter of the rock group Styx. I'm not sure if you're a Styx fan, but I was a huge Styx fan as a kid. I had every album they ever put out, and I just loved the theatricality of their music. And I was assistant directing a musical, assistant directing a play at Steppenwolf Theater 27 years ago. And I rode my bike to work one day, and standing in front of the theater was Dennis DeYoung. And I recognized him, of course, from the albums and the concerts I'd been to. And I said, "Are you Dennis DeYoung?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Oh my God, I'm such a fan of yours. You're my rock and roll hero. I just think your work is amazing. I love Styx." And he says, "Do you like musicals?" I said, "Well, of course I do. My wife was actually starring in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, starring Donny Osmond." Wow. At the time. That's why we were in Chicago. And so I said, "I love musicals." He said, "Well, I've written a musical of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Might you be interested in hearing it?" I was like, "Yeah, of course I would." So the show closes, and I get a call from Steppenwolf saying, "There's this guy, Dennis DeYoung, asking us for your phone number. Can we give it to him?" Of course. So Dennis called me, and he invited me to come to his house. He said I was the first person he had heard outside of his family, first person he had showed this show to outside of his family. And he sang the entire show for me single-handedly. Not once. I went there. I brought Gary Sinise there once. I brought some designers there. I kept going back because I really wanted to get involved in the show. Anyway, cut to 27 years later, I told Dennis, if I ever run a theater, I'm doing your show. And here we are at Skylight. And it was postponed because of the pandemic, but we're finally doing it.
Yeah, full circle moment. Again, that's going to be on stage May 20th through June 12th. And Michael, wow, so much to look forward to. And I'm thankful that you found the time to come by and talk to us about it all today.
And I thank you for making the time to celebrate the arts in this way. It's so important. And, just thanks to you.
Thank you. Michael Unger is the artistic director for the Skylight Music Theater. For ticket information, you can visit skylightmusictheater.org or call 414-291-7800. When we return to Connect MKE, we'll talk to a local movie director and producer and tell you how you can see his latest film, Untangled. We'll do that right after this.